Joining us now, NBC's Ali Vitale, former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Julian Castro, and former Republican Representative Carlos Curbelo from Florida. They're both MSNBC political analysts. So, Ali, I know you attended Democratic Congressman Ryan's town hall last night in upstate New York. What happened there?
Yeah, politically purple district, an area I've been covering over the course of the last few years because it's one of those so-called frontline districts, politically speaking. And so going back and seeing not just the political fallout from people like Chuck Schumer's strategic decision around the shutdown last week, but also talking to people about the tangible impacts that they're already seeing in their communities of cuts from DOGE. Things like contracts from the Housing and Urban Development Agency being canceled, and then nonprofit groups on the ground being forced to grapple with whether or not people who rely on that money are going to end up being homeless. Those are the exact stories that I heard on the ground and more. But then it comes back to the full collision of politics and policy. And that's where you have people like the voters that I spoke to talking about the outgrowth of Schumer's decision on the shutdown. Watch. We're in New York. Chuck Schumer, of course, has been a senator here for a while. In that room, when he was brought up, people booed. That's not normal for Chuck Schumer in New York.
Not at all. I don't think what he did was likable, clearly. Was it the best move? I understand it, but we're bringing pillows to a knife fight, and nothing is helping.
People on the street are mad. People on the street are passionate, and we're not seeing that from leadership at points. So there are leaders out there that are fighting that fight, and there are leaders out there that are that same old model of let's comply and complain.
So that idea of comply and complain is a refrain that I imagine we're going to continue hearing as Democratic lawmakers keep meeting their constituents and hearing the reaction to not just what happened on the shutdown, but all of the fights to come on reconciliation, on this larger push from Republicans to do $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, which is really the root of why they're doing all of this cutting within the government apparatus to begin with. That's the battle that Democrats are going to have to face.
Ali, what do they tell you, the folks that were there last night, what they wish would have happened, for example, just on this CR issue?
I've heard this now from not just people in New York, but a congressman in Virginia who has a lot of federal workers as part of his district. He said, I was getting phone calls every day from my constituents telling me to shut the government down. That is the same thing that I heard from constituents here in the Poughkeepsie area around New York, because they wanted the Democrats to at least show that they had the leverage, show that they had the fight. But when I ask the larger question, which is, okay, you want more action, but what is enough? There is no tangible answer for that. I think in large part because people realize they're hamstrung by being in the minority, but also they're looking for someone to get creative, and it doesn't seem like anyone's done that yet.
Julian, is it a matter of elected leaders not being creative? I mean, is there a growing divide within the Democratic Party?
Oh, I mean, that's clear. There's a divide. We've seen that in full display with comments from Hakeem Jeffries initially about what Schumer did, Nancy Pelosi, and a number of others in Congress. There is a deep divide in terms of how to proceed. And I think it is fair to say that people have not been creative, that leadership has not been creative. I mean, we saw Tommy Tuberville as one example not too long ago try and completely stop anything going forward, basically, in terms of nominations in the Senate because he didn't like some abortion policy. Democrats need to get bolder. They need to get more creative. They need to show people what they stand for and what they're willing to stand up for. They're not doing that right now, and that divide is growing bigger and bigger. We saw in the NBC News poll recently a 27% approval rating for the Democratic Party. That's the lowest that's been recorded in that poll, and I'm convinced that it's not just because Republicans and independents right now don't have high regard for Democrats. It's because Democrats are saying we don't like what the Democratic Party is doing.
Yeah, and Carlos, meanwhile, some Republicans are getting backlash from their constituents. This is what happened last night at a town hall for Wyoming Congresswoman Harriet Hagman.
It's so bizarre to me how obsessed you are with federal government. You guys are going to have a heart attack if you don't calm down. I'm sorry. Your hysteria is just really over the top.
Carlos, is there a divide or a growing divide within the Republican Party between voters and their representatives?
Well, Jose, it's pretty clear there are major risks for both parties out there right now, and for very different reasons. For Republicans, it's this reconciliation process and how aggressive they're going to be. We've seen each party, when they win these trifectas in Congress, overreach, get too aggressive. Certainly what compounds all of that is how fast-moving, ambitious, and aggressive the Trump administration has been in trying to reform the government. Oftentimes there's a backlash, right? And some of these trifectas end up in wave elections for the opposite party. So you certainly are starting to hear, particularly House Republicans, worry about this, saying, are we being too aggressive? Are we pushing too hard? And are we going to lose another 40 seats like we did in 2018 in the middle of the first Trump presidency? So certainly a lot of risk for Democrats out there because their base wants them to fight, even though they don't have the votes to fight. For Republicans, the risk is in being too aggressive and then facing a major backlash next year.
That backlash, Ali, would be maybe mitigated somewhat by the fact that Trump was very clear during the entire process of what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
This is not a surprise, and yet it seems as though for some, it is surprising that he is coming through with what he promised. What are the people that are coming out to these town halls actually wanting to see, and what are the issues that drive them to these town halls?
It's the age-old thing where people hear what Trump says and then think, surely he can't want to actually do that. Believe the president when he says what he's going to do. He often telegraphs what his plans are. So we're very much in that space on everything from immigration to the cuts being made in the federal government. But I do think that in terms of a motivating factor, yes, Republicans want to come out and register their concerns. Democrats want to come out and register their concerns. But I felt a palpable sense last night of people who also just wanted to be in community with other people who were concerned about what they are seeing. Whether it was political in nature wasn't the point. The point was that members of their community were feeling hurt, were feeling pain, were feeling fear. And I talked to people as they were leaving and I asked, I know you didn't change anything tonight, but do you feel any more hopeful? And they said, yeah, it felt good to know I wasn't the only one who's here. And I think that's one of the outgrowths of this that's not political, but does allow people a little bit of hope as they go forward.
Ali Vitale, Julian Castro, Carlos Curbelo, thank you very much. And Ali, it's great